So today, Anders Luque Ayala will give a talk titled Computing Urbanity, How Politics Change as we Move from Digital Knowing to Digitally Making of the City. So please go ahead, Anders. We're very happy to have you here.
Thank you, Karina. So my biggest apologies for not being with you in person. Unfortunately, someone in my household has long COVID, and that's keeping us housebound for a few months now. I'm really an urban infrastructures scholar. I'm going to share my screen. Right. So I'm really an urban infrastructures scholar, and my interest is really the materiality of the city by way of infrastructures, urban infrastructures, and the extent to which these infrastructures are technological assemblages that are in effect political. So I'm going to introduce the book, Urban Operating Systems, which I wrote with Simon very recently, initially I'm going to talk about those old conceptualizations of the smart city a la IBM that Jennifer referred to a while ago, the big technological companies. And then I'm going to move a little bit more to specific examples that speak more of a broader ecosystem of digital urban technologies that is shared by big and small companies, big and small applications, etc. And when we set out with Simon to write in this book, we did it because we were quite unhappy at what we would see a few years ago as a critical analysis of the narrative of smart cities, but just the narrative, with very little engagement with the technology itself. And at the same time, we saw a fair bit of literature on digital cities or on smart cities, which overlook the extent to which technology and society are co-constituted. Along with this, a lot of a solutionist approach that didn't recognize the extent to which what you have in technology is a template for social and political organization. And towards the beginning of the project, we drew heavily on a Foucauldian governmentality, and we found Foucault's governmentality useful because it's got a concern on how thought becomes embedded in technical means. And to use this way to examine the problem of the smart city provided us with, hang on, I think I just got a message from Adriana. Okay, no. So, sorry. It provided us with a way of considering the materiality of the city, to engage with urban infrastructures and with the possibility of governing through infrastructures. And drawing on governmentality frameworks, historians of science and technology such as Chris Otter and Patrick Joyce have explored the relationship between governing technological machines and the city. Focusing on the materiality of technological infrastructures, these authors uncover how this materiality carries out a political significance, enabling a government through and by technology. It is a politics that is enhanced precisely because it is positioned as technical, in quotes, you could say, and therefore seemingly external to political domains, a little bit unscrutable. And that approach allowed us to conceptualize a politics of urban technologies outside of the claims of newness and novelty that are so common within contemporary digital scholarship, and also within the work of smart cities industry. And we decided to start with a historic analysis into the roots of the computational city, or the use of digital technologies in cities. And towards those early days of the project, we drew significantly on the work of Jennifer Light, who works within science, technology, and society. We also took inspiration from the work of Orit Halpern, whom I hope is with you there in Malmo. And Jennifer Light has a really interesting quote, which is here on the screen. The history of cyber cities is better understood through an appreciation of simulations in the context of military war games at RAND, the RAND Corporation, and MIT. Really, when you look at this, you realize that a form of computational city goes back to the post-war period in the late 1960s and early 1970s, when many of the computing technologies originally developed by the defense and military industries in the United States in the context of World War II were looking for new markets, were trying to expand. At the time, the city and its problems were framed in this militaristic defensive language. And in parallel, urban planners came to view solutions as a matter of processual management. As Jennifer Light explains, urban planners initially saw computer simulations as an extension of existing planning tools, such as maps and 3D models, a kind of additional instrument that they could use to perform monotonous tasks, to handle large numbers of variables, and to visualize problems in new ways. And gradually, throughout that period of the late 1960s, the city became redefined in cybernetic terms, as systems analysis and computing offered an opportunity for unifying different planning traditions that saw cities either as organic systems or as machines. Key to this was the incorporation of action and feedback in tools such as databases and computer simulations, in which real-time information could properly represent cities and urban processes in ways that maps and models could not. So this goes back quite a few decades, but this application of computational technologies in cities went out of fashion at some point in the 1970s. The urban context was not the only domain where experimentation with computing technologies beyond military applications was occurring. Corporations, in particular, were interested in the potential of computer systems to streamline corporate production processes. This is a process that starts in the late 1950s and fully consolidates in the early 1980s with the advent of logistics software and a type of software known as enterprise resource management systems, or ERPs. By the turn of the century, the global market for ERPs was over US 38 billion, consolidating IT as the largest area of capital expenditure in US business. These enterprise resource planning systems, ERPs, played a huge role in shaping the corporation as we know it today. They put in place the systems, the flows, the ontological categories through which the corporation thinks about itself. And to an extent, what we have seen in the past 2 decades, branded as the smart city, is a comeback of these digital technologies to the city after a saturated corporate market. The technologies that make up a smart city platforms or packages are very much based in these earlier technologies that were initially applied through the corporation. So the first topic that I would like to discuss today is the idea that the ecosystem of digital urban technologies that we speak about in the book as urban operating systems operates as a diagram of power that shapes the city, a diagrammatic of control reshaping the urban in its own image. And probably a good starting point is the work on smart cities developed by IBM and other ICT corporates over the past few years. In the decade of 2010, IBM not only copyrights the idea of smarter cities, it also develops a range of manuals to make them. The manual that you see on the screen establishes the foundations for IBM's conceptualization of an urban operating system. And the way in which the city is conceptualized here is very revealing. First and foremost, the problem of the city is seen as one of lacking integration, whereby different urban functions operate in disconnected ways. The city also lacks the ability to make sense, to visualize, to process the data that it generates. In essence, the city is conceptualized just like the private corporations that were the main clients for the enterprise resource planning systems that became popular in the 1980s and 90s. Those that I mentioned a couple of slides ago. Suffering from a lack of integration in their operations and an inability to manage the vast amount of data that they generate. And here I just read the second part of the quote on the screen. IBM addresses these and many other challenging issues by providing insights, management, and oversight capabilities for a city or enterprise, as they both face the same issues, close quotes. Now, the marketing material on smart cities developed by other large ICT companies, such as Hitachi or Microsoft, reveals a similar understanding of the city, whereby the urban is not only conceptualized following a business logic, but also through the logics of computer programming and hardware systems. Here, for example, in Hitachi's vision for smart cities, we can see the city as a system of systems. This is about interconnected complexity, yet simplified and rendered manageable. This representation establishes hierarchies and a broad mapping of connections alongside ontological techniques of classification that result in the provision of a system for organization and the development of typologies. Microsoft's City Next technical reference model overview conceptualizes urban flows as a form of autarky. This conceptualization, for example, focuses on the data within the system itself, which ignores other forms of knowledge and expertise that lay outside of the system. This image of a digital city puts forward an internalized, inward-looking, technocratic system that is not open to challenges or other processes of innovation and creativity. Or back to Hitachi, the city, already disassembled in layers and data, is then selectively reassembled through an attempt to construct a coherent aggregate. What comes across very clearly is the aim to reconfigure the city into data packages, which later can be reconfigured in a variety of ways. The specificity of the urban is actually lost, and by combining data sets, the city can be reconfigured in a multiplicity of ways. That's the claim. That's how this is seen. And this is a particularly powerful image there in the screen, precisely because of its simplicity, where colored blocks with no particular reference to the city are reaggregated by a dashed line, which notionally integrates them towards a new urban function. Or as Hitachi puts it, open quotes, daily life services infrastructure can be broken down, disassembled into the various different services provided by the city. I want to illustrate the way in which these urban operating systems operate as a diagrammatic of power with two examples. And the first one is about data, more specifically, the making of data as urban infrastructure. Think about New York, a place that for a long time now has been thinking of itself as a data-driven city. In February 2012, the New York City Council approved the Open Data Law, requiring all city agencies to open their data by 2018. The law set ambitious objectives calling for an accessible repository of machine-readable data that will, in quotes, make this operation of city government more transparent, effective, and accountable to the public, close quotes. Its purpose was not simply to streamline intra and intergovernmental communication and interoperability, but also to open up possibilities for, quotes again, the public to assist in identifying efficient solutions for government, to promote innovative strategies for social progress, and to create economic opportunities, close quotes from the law itself. Now, the Open Data Law was one of the landmark interventions of Michael Bloomberg, a mayor who had come from the private sector and was convinced of the potential for data to transform the city. To an extent, this is a story that illustrates the transmutation of corporate rationalities into the urban world. Bloomberg's involvement in the making of New York as a data-driven city is salient, not because he's a businessman, but because his business is founded on data flows. 20 years before becoming mayor of New York, he developed the Bloomberg Terminal, a purpose-built computer terminal that enabled real-time access to financial market data on an electronic trading platform. The terminal is credited with revolutionizing Wall Street and contributing to the growth of the financial industry throughout the 80s and 90s. New York's embrace of data, ushered by Bloomberg, is underpinned by narratives around data-driven efficiency and information as a tool for empowerment, and substantiated by financial practices of decision-making informed by real-time data streams. Bloomberg's open data law committed New York to a single web portal through which all agencies would share their information with the public. This became NYC Open Data, advertised as a powerful tool that ensures transparency and fosters civic innovation within our city to help improve the quality of life, close quotes. As of 2018, the city had made over 2,000 data sets available to the public, and the portal had 20,000 users every week. In addition to Bloomberg's open data law, arguments about value generation and public engagement played a pivotal role in the introduction of NYC open data. In particular, it was argued that public engagement with the city's data would strengthen the regional economy by encouraging private entrepreneurial involvement. And here you can see how what I'm discussing speaks a lot to what Jennifer Clark said a while ago. A staff member of New York City's Department of Information Technology and Telecommunication told us during our research interview, open quotes, "We are interested in how open data can boost the city's economy and help create new business and drive entrepreneurship. We want to create business around data," close quotes. The open data law explicitly stated that the desire was for the public to assist in identifying solutions for government, encouraging a form of cooperation between civic technologies and the municipal government. This enabled input from civic hackers, open data activists, and other urban technologists. Such activists and practitioner groups played a particularly important role in the development of the portal, advising on its initial phases and agitating towards the release of particular data sets. When I met civic hackers in New York, I was struck by their strong belief in that data is to be liberated. They spoke about data in very particular ways, explicitly and often talking about surfacing data, liberating it, making it searchable and discoverable. In the words of a self-titled data evangelists, one of a growing number of data professionals and activists describing themselves in this way, open quotes, "That is what the open data movement is all about, freeing that information. It is how we surface information," close quotes. In effect, this surfacing of data increases its utility and through this, its value. New York City has embraced data through a multiplicity of channels. Since 2009, the city has been hosting Big Apps, one of the world's most popular city-based hackathons. The event is supported by a range of IT corporations, including Facebook, eBay, Google, and Microsoft. Here, software developers, designers, and entrepreneurs are asked to, in quotes, apply their know-how to improve New York City and submit solutions that leverage data and technology to solve major issues for New Yorkers, close quotes. Scholars have previously associated hackathons with a low risk and low cost prototyping space for business and products within the digital economy. For sponsors and participants, the city, encountered through its data, is a playground for experimentation. The Big Apps competition advocates for the involvement of citizens in local government, but also emphasizes the promotion of entrepreneurship. Several winners have gone on to secure further funding to develop their products, in some cases becoming startup companies within the digital economy. And a couple of examples are Embark NYC or Roadify, which were winners of the early versions of the competition, which went on to secure investment from companies such as BMW, Capital Networks, and Apple in order to develop products beyond the prototyping stage. There are three concepts that I would like to discuss in order to explain how this datafication of the city advances a transformation in urban flows: decoupling, content distribution, and the embodiment of data. And let's start with decoupling. In the datafied city, data in its flows is increasingly disconnected from both origin and ownership, an inevitable condition of disassembling and reassembling data. liberated urban data, decoupled and free to flow, is recast as an asset in its own right. The origin of data, once that data surfaces, becomes inconsequential. What matters are the recombinatory possibilities this liberated data offers. The consequence of datafication is the possibility of repackaging urban data as a commodity, turning the city into a mega platform for content distribution. Emerging digital platforms that rely on urban data to operate as distribution channels, these platforms now rely on urban data to operate as distribution channels for urban flows. Like traditional media content, such as TV, news, urban data is surfaced, repackaged, and distributed as content across digital channels such as Google, Google Maps, web pages, smartphone apps, and so on. It's a process that involves the mediatization of urban infrastructures and is perhaps best illustrated by an app developer working with transport-related open data in New York City, whom we interview for our book. And he says, open quotes, "We are taking that data and we push it out through different types of distribution and exhibition channels, our own model applications, public digital signage, etc. And then through third-party applications and websites. Transportation information is content, just like a television program is distributed through cable and via satellite, and all then broadcast over the internet. This is also content," close quotes. Now, critically, this form of data as infrastructure is not just about commercial interventions that are enabled by the generation, assembly, and relay of data within and through public domains. It embodies a way of thinking about governing, where local government is reinterpreted as a convener of platforms, the provider of a marketplace for a new urban flow. And here I'm referring to the work of Sarah Barnes, which maybe some of you are familiar with. Municipalities increasingly provide data. Entrepreneurs increasingly take care of their recombination. A critical insight of our analysis of data as infrastructure is the embodied nature of urban data. As data lines flow in the city, arguably as binary digital types of immateriality, they are reconstituted as urban flows encapsulating a multiplicity of urban materialities. As Mackenzie Ward puts it in her book, A Hacking Manifesto, the hack depends on its ability to interact with the material world. It is precisely through such materialization that data as infrastructure commands power and affects control. So data and its urban footprint as the primary flow of the contemporary information society is not simply a digital and immaterial abstraction of urban processes and flows. As an urban flow, data has its own materiality. Its power comes not from its digital nature, but from its ability to materialize, attaching itself to the city's material flows, and through this engendering a new nature of the flow. Electricity flows in the smart grid are no longer simply made of electrons. They are made of electrons and data. Water flows in the smart water network are no longer made solely of water molecules, but water molecules and data. Transport, waste flows are no longer made of vehicles, pedestrians, refuse, and litter, but of these flows and data. This form of embodiment, as engendering some form of intelligence incarnate, is related to the new non-digital materialities of data, as much as to the emergence of carnal bodies in the city's infrastructures. Datafication in the city heralds a reconfiguration of the boundary between infrastructure and the public, where people and private organizations become an essential component of the infrastructure. Now, from a sensing citizen to, for example, waste crowdsourcing transport flows, to the very civic hacking community acting as a type of infrastructure incarnate, data as infrastructure, as a new corporeal flow in the city, is underpinned by social bodies and the socio-technical reconfiguration of all other infrastructural flows in the city. The second example I want to use is about sensing as a way of transforming value chains. For this, I would like to use the example of Barcelona. The experience of Barcelona illustrates broad shifts in urbanism resulting from an engagement with sensor technologies. And here I will be talking more about Barcelona's smart city initiative of more or less 2011 to 2015, rather than the more recent one. And this is when Mayor Javier Trias was in charge of the city. This initiative fostered a range of public-private partnerships advancing urban digital innovation. And both the municipal government and local startup companies have experimented with sensing technologies and their incorporation in a variety of network infrastructures. Through this, sensing emerged as an important distinctive dimension of Barcelona's version of computational urbanism. Sensor makers in Barcelona argue that by measuring urban processes, sensors will unlock unlimited potential for operational improvement. Pilot projects, for example, have paired sensors for humidity and environmental conditions with the remote control of water irrigation in parks, resulting in reduced water consumption. Waste management sensors developed by Urbiotica, a Barcelona-based company, were piloted to measure waste levels in trash containers. They connect every 20 minutes via the cellular network to a centralized management platform where an algorithm determines whether the container needs emptying or not. And the idea is to optimize collection schedules and routes. And to an extent, this is giving sensors a privileged place within emerging forms of austerity urbanism. Now, one particular initiative seeking to generate impact citywide scale is Centilo, the city's sensor and actuator platform developed under the leadership of the Municipal Institute of Informatics. In the words of the municipal engineers behind Centilo, the platform is a central part of an initiative that seeks to extract a model of the city's material reality, and make it into a virtual, and they are the ones that use this language, a virtual model made of data, an information system that connects to a physical reality, and through this supports the work of urban managers and other urban practitioners. Now, Centilo is an open source and open access platform agglomerating the data generated by a variety of municipally and privately owned sensors. It was launched in 2014. By 2017, Centilo had linked over 17,000 sensors and had processed over 1.5 billion data items. The mobilization of sensors in the city rests on assumptions around the collection of data as a form of value creation that enables further infrastructural interventions. With the public recast as data producer and embroiled within larger infrastructural systems, both data and sensing quickly emerge not only as objects of managerial value, but as ways of generating monetary value. Sensors' ability to generate value relies on their capacity to reaggregate, to rebundle hyperfragmented streams and data points that are in the city. They generate forms of value derived from the flow of data and its recalculation on top of the traditional value of the circulation itself. So on top of the circulation of energy, on top of the circulation of water, etc. And this is explained by the founder of a Barcelona urban sensors startup, now started in Barcelona, now with offices in London, Singapore, LA, and Poland. For me, and I'm reading the quote on the screen, smart cities are about the digitalization of public space, and sensors are what allows you to digitize public space. I say that my business is one of real estate. When I install a sensor, all the value I virtualize is converted into digital and can be exploited by me or by third parties, enabling the creation of an economy underpinned by electronic dispositives. In cities, this generates an infrastructure that virtualizes public space, generating a pool of information in real time for which third parties generate applications, end quote. Now, the experience of Barcelona shows sensors not simply as processes of capturing data in order to know the city and its processes, but as a strategy to render calculative intelligibility across urban processes. We argue that this practice is generative of a particular type of urban environment, providing the technomaterial substrate for a new urban economy based on data flows. Beyond simply providing tools for efficiency and optimization, urban digital sensors both embody and enable computational urbanism's desire to create new forms of value via digital assets, further advancing a commodification of urban processes and, at times, public goods. The sensor and its platform is the body that translates and mediates between the material domains of the city and their digitalization, embodying the informational diagrammatic characteristic of the computational city. They transform urban flows, such as water, energy, cars, pedestrian, etc., into data sets, playing a key role in the computational city's ability to disassemble and reassemble urban circulations. To finish, this intelligence incarnate of the urban, achieved through the application of computational logics to the city's flows, speaks of a new material body that inscribes information onto other bodies. And here we take clue from the work of Jennifer Gabri's, the entities created by data sensors, by data, by sensors, by mapping, by calculation, are not simply detached objects. They are processes that subsume experience and relations. They get entangled in generative processes and relations, giving birth to a new set of bodies information. Now, here lies both ontology and ontogenetics for me within urban computational logics. From datafication to sensing, this is not simply about generating entities and environments, but about transmuting towards calculative sites and bodies that, regardless of difference, operate on the same ontological plane, that of calculability. Thank you.